to support her own media campaign. And ultimately, these are criminal activities which we intend to hold her accountable for. But the fact that this administration didn't remove her completely from the taxpayer dollar in terms of employment indicates that they don't actually they are not actually seeking accountability, because if they were, they would have actually removed her from federal service and be seeking to hold her accountable for her actions, and instead have put her in charge of another office somewhere else in the government.
Despite having no time, I want to quickly ask you about whether House Oversight and how is going to hold DOJ accountable for this most recent release of more Epstein files, way past the legal date upon which to do so. And the fact that it does include these three interviews, if you will, with someone who has made an allegation against the president.
Yeah, well, this week we issued a bipartisan subpoena of Pam Bondi for her mishandling of the Epstein case. It's very clear that the new files provide greater detail about the allegations against the president. And I can tell you that within the next week, we will be filing articles of impeachment against Pam Bondi for her handling of this case.
Extraordinary. All right. We will look ahead to all that. Melanie Stansbury, despite not having that adorable dog. 50 past with the breaking news on the government's handling of the Epstein files after DOJ released documents revealing uncorroborated accusations made in 2019 against President Trump. One woman claims she was sexually abused by both Epstein and Trump when she was as young as 13 years old. President Trump has denied any wrongdoing. The documents came after news outlets reported files had been withheld or removed from DOJ's website. And today, a member of Congress told me Democrats will initiate impeachment proceedings against Attorney General Pam Bondi.
This week, we issued a bipartisan subpoena of Pam Bondi for her mishandling of the Epstein case. It's very clear that the new files provide greater detail about the allegations against the president. And I can tell you that within the next week, we will be filing articles of impeachment against Pam Bondi for her handling of this case.
Joining me now, Haley Fuchs, congressional reporter with Politico. Haley, welcome. So you wrote about Bondi being in trouble. How likely are impeachment proceedings next week? Who would introduce them, and would it have GOP support?
So I think what's really notable here is that Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, the two members of Congress who shepherded the Epstein Files Transparency Act that got us to where we are here, are pursuing an inherent contempt measure, a very rarely used power of Congress that allows it to issue its own punishments against people and potentially put people behind bars. And they're pursuing an inherent contempt charge against Pam Bondi. And Ro Khanna told me that they're expecting that there are as many as 20 Republican lawmakers who would join them.
Let me ask you, an inherent contempt, I'm not familiar with that proceeding. Is that something that someone in the DOJ would have to help facilitate, or is this something exclusively run by Congress and could be implemented and legally passed by Congress?
It would not involve the DOJ. It would allow the House Sergeant at Arms to potentially take Pam Bondi into custody should lawmakers choose that. It could potentially mean they levy fines against her, but it would be a way to go around DOJ, given that holding someone in contempt of Congress would involve DOJ to bring those charges.
And Haley, you said that this could potentially bring jail time?
That's a possibility here. It remains to be seen what punishment lawmakers choose. But this is a really kind of esoteric congressional power that hasn't been used in many, many decades. So this is all kind of uncharted waters here.
And how many Republicans are on board with this? And can you name names?
Ro Khanna told me at this point that they're expecting as many as 20. But I think it's notable that 5 Republicans in the House Oversight Committee voted to subpoena Pam Bondi.
The Trump DOJ's bungled, probably illegal response to the law requiring the release of the Epstein files is back in the news tonight because of Republicans who are not taking AG Pam Bondi or Trump at their word, essentially. A committee just hours ago voting to subpoena Attorney General Bondi. 5 Republicans voted yes. They didn't even stall or say, with everything going on in the world, we need a few more weeks. No, this is barreling back at the Trump DOJ. It's one day after lawmakers also dialed up the heat and requested new interviews from 7 others implicated in the case from the files that have come out. Mind you, a lot of these people were in the files that the DOJ had for years because they're old files. It's only the public disclosure that's putting on the heat. There's new reporting that tens of thousands of documents have also been removed, that is to say withheld or possibly illegally hidden by the DOJ. CBS has been combing through this. They found about 65,000 pages were there and removed. The Wall Street Journal reports it's about 47,000 total files if you're counting the original file metric. The DOJ says they're actually under review and they could be ready for reproduction by the end of the week. Remember, all of this was on a legal deadline that they broke. Then they came in late. Then they pulled it back. At a minimum, this is a bungled, failed process of the transparency that Donald Trump ran on back in 24 and a law that he signed. And at most, it may be an illegal cover-up. Lawmakers have been demanding the documents.
The DOJ wants to say they're done with this document production. The problem is they've taken down documents.
There is zero reason why Pam Bondi and the DOJ right now are withholding those documents unless they don't want us to see them, and they're essentially part of this cover-up.
I think that the Department of Justice has been in a cover-up mode for many months.
That's the pressure. We are joined by New York Times opinion writer Molly Jong-Fast and law professor Melissa Murray. Professor Murray, this is real pressure with Republicans joining in, whatever their motivations. What do you see happening tonight?
So I think there's a lot going on here. The fact that Boebert and Mace are involved in this, and Mace really led the charge here. I mean, these are 2 of the women in the Republican caucus who have been really vociferous about their complaints, their grievances with Mike Johnson's leadership and with the president and with the handling of this particular matter. And they really brought it. And this was after Attorney General Pamela Jo Bondi said that she would actually be willing to brief the committee on this. And they're like, nope, we're going to stay and we're going to have an actual subpoena, which would force a closed-door deposition, which would mean that Attorney General Bondi probably would not be able to engage in the kind of Real Housewives theatrics that we've seen in her other congressional testimony. This would be a much more focused inquiry, real questions, and she wouldn't be able to fall back on some of those talking points that she's done in past testimony.
Molly, I want to kind of turn to you on the existential part of this. Right. People say, what is reality? Does anything matter?
Right.
People look at Trump, who's gotten away with certain things, and they say maybe nothing matters, or it's naive and cute that you even think that anything's going to come out. And yet, a lot of documents have come out, and then the ones they were hiding and messing up on their cover-up got caught relatively quickly because we still have some working journalists and investigators and whatnot. And so I'm curious where you put this on the nothing matters spectrum, because as I've emphasized, and it's worth noting, even Republicans putting the heat on Bondi this week.
Yeah, no, look, the Nancy Mace thing is big, and I talked to a member of Oversight who said that she really led the charge in this. And you have to remember, these women in the House are really, really mad at Mike Johnson. OK, we saw a lot of reporting about this. They have been really mistreated. They feel they've been marginalized. And what we're seeing is real blowback here. So I actually think this really does matter. And every time that these people testify, like these hearings, like remember when Les Wexner testified, he implicated Trump, right? He said, Trump came to the fashion show and I didn't understand why. And so every time you do this, it's a risk for these Republicans who are trying to make this go away.
And then, and this goes to, the problem with narratives? They're simplified and usually false.
Yes.
So there's a narrative that Republicans let Trump get away with everything. And that happens. And then people think if you disagree with that narrative, you're letting them off the hook or you're minimizing the problem. But that's a problem over here if you believe in oversight, which is in the Constitution.
Right.
And yet at the same time, on this issue especially, they not only overruled him and passed the law, veto-proof, but some, not all, but some of them are saying, no, we passed this law, you have to comply with it.
And I also think, if you're talking about narrative, it sure seems like this DOJ is trying to cover up. And, it's almost like the cover up has become bigger than the possible crime.
Well, it always becomes bigger than the possible. I mean, I think what's really striking here is that you had this law passed. One of the critiques of the law was that there weren't really penalties for noncompliance. And we saw all of the issues with the redactions, the foot dragging, with releasing the papers, the different tranches of documents that were released. And many people noted it was really up to Congress to hold the administration's feet to the fire when it came to this, because there weren't teeth in the statute itself. And now they're actually doing it.
But one of the things when you talk to victims, and remember, there are so many of these survivors, and they're really all together now, and they're talking for the first time ever, and they have this list that Thomas Massie has of 250 people.
Critics argue that an administration of Donald Trump may be entering a period of internal instability, while increasing pressure on members of his cabinet and senior officials. According to this view, Trump could begin making personal changes as political tensions rise. Observers say such moves can sometimes happen when leaders face mounting criticism or when controversies threaten to damage that administration's reputation. In those circumstances, replacing officials can serve as a way to redirect blame or signal that changes are being made. Another factor discussed by analysts is the possibility that some officials might face investigations, impeachment proceedings, or legal security, while others may choose to resign before being dismissed. Political commentators often note that Trump has historically been sensitive to how these situations appear publicly. In his leadership style, maintaining the appearance of control and authority has been a key priority. And voluntary resignations can sometimes be viewed as embarrassing or damaging to that image. Trump has also been aware of how internal turnover affected perceptions of his first administration. During his presidency, numerous officials left their positions through resignations, dismisses, or other departures, creating a pattern of high staff turnover. Movements such as the aftermath of the January 6 United States Capitol attack saw several officials distance themselves from the administration, including figures like William Barr, who had disagreements with Trump over key issues. Because of that history, analysts suggest Trump may try to manage departures carefully to avoid repeating the perception that his administration is losing support from within. However, critics argue that if more officials leave or removed, it could reduce the number of people available to absorb political blame for controversial decisions. In that scenario, responsibility for policy failures may increasingly fall directly on the president himself, intensifying the political pressure on the administration.